join internationally acclaimed overland expert Paul Marsh and award-winning journalist Gregory Simpson as they delve into all things responsible overlanding. From choosing the right vehicle, getting yourself prepared, getting your vehicle prepared, safety tips, and much, much more. Only on Responsible Overlanding.
The vehicles come in here and we start by stripping down. When I say stripping down, the axles come apart. So if you look here, basically here we've stripped down all the axles, get all the components cleaned up to decide exactly what we're going to change. Much like what we did on Andrew's 105. So whenever a truck comes in, and these are all clients of mine, these Troopies, there's 3 of them here. And what we're doing is we're actually going through, so we'll strip down the axles, we'll check the bearings, we'll often change them for the terrain tamer heavy duty bearing kits, and we'll rebuild the knuckles, inspect the diffs, and what we're doing is building back in reliability. So the oils are going to be changed, the filters are going to be changed, bushes get changed and checked. Sometimes when it doesn't need changing, we won't change it. But to build back in reliability, we often have to look at what are the potential problems of the car, how much mileage is on the car, and where is this car going to go? And by looking at those points, we can go, right, this is what we're going to do to this car. So in an engine bay here, we will do the cam belt, we will change the belts, we will do the water pump. The rest of it's pretty good. We'll do hoses. Depending on the radiator, it will get flushed and cleaned, but possibly some of them changed. Again, age. These vehicles, these Troopies have only got just over 100,000 on them. Now, that's quite unique. And I scour.
How many years old are we looking at these trucks?
These 2011, 2012, round about there. And I've just bought another one now. So, it's really, I really struggle to find Troopies, and when I do, I grab them with both hands. So I can get them for my clients because I love them. They're great trucks. For 2 people, I've got one couple, this vehicle here, and they've got 2 children. One very small and one very, very small, bump still. And this truck is going to be built for them, and they're going to spend their time traveling around Southern Africa, and he's mad keen on kite surfing. What a wonderful family, and it's a privilege to work with people and build their dream. This is their dream vehicle, and basically it's been entrusted to us to go through the truck, work out what we need to change, so that the standard truck will go through and take out any electrics that are not standard, that get fitted, because now we need a base level. And to get a base level on this, take the axles apart, pull the diffs out, check the prop shafts, do the clutch, rebalance prop shafts, check diffs, put back, redo wheel bearings. That's taking the drive line of the vehicle and making it really reliable. So we've gone through the engine, the gearboxes are normally at that mileage really good. You can upgrade the gearbox. We're doing it on this one. We're putting a Land Cruiser 80 series.
The 105.
No, it's the stronger cast iron box which comes out of the petrol Land Cruiser. And it's a much stronger box than these come out with, especially if you're going to upgrade the motors, or if you're going to put turbos onto them. You've got to, often if we'll put the best motor you could put in here is a turbo motor into a Troopy. If you took a motor out of an 80 series, the 1HDT, the 12 valve or the 24 valve motor that you can put in these, it's a fantastic conversion. But then you do need to do the gearbox. So again, we do make those conversions. Nothing wrong with keeping it standard. It's a good truck. Every vehicle has got its strengths and its weaknesses. And I think that's important, that people understand what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, how am I going to work with this, what is my budget, what am I going to do. But inherently we're trying to go back and take a car which is a good few years old, sometimes has stood a long time. So it's not good to let vehicles stand. Vehicle standing, brake fluid doesn't get changed, antifreeze doesn't get changed. Brake fluid absorbs moisture, and that's why you should change it every year, depending on where you're living. But even so, I always say to people, change brake fluid, flush it out, flush the clutch fluid out. But change your oils often.
So for your overseas clients, is that presumably a service you offer is just keeping the cars running when they're not in the country?
Yeah. So we basically can store people's cars. So in Cape Town, I've got storage facilities. We store the vehicles for people. There are different places in Africa that I know, friends of mine, or places that will store vehicles. And when you're storing your vehicle, you want to basically take the truck, fill up the fuel tanks, because moisture builds up in tanks. So fill them up, put it on axle stands, take any food out, charge the batteries full, disconnect the batteries. And that way you can leave the vehicle for a good length of time just to stand. Okay, and then ideally once a month you want to run it. And if it's on axle stands, you can let the wheels rotate, and that's also good to do. Now, depending on where you are, trucks like this, I'll take a truck like this, and once we've done all the mechanical work, we'll do a complete chassis treatment. Because I hate seeing a vehicle that goes rusty. It's just criminal. Especially if you're taking an old vehicle and you're putting a lot of money into it to enhance it, to build it up. You don't want it to rust from the underneath. So we get a treatment. So I've got a guy who does an amazing job, does a rust treatment that kills off the rust, which is like an industrial rust converter, and it converts that rust and kills it. And then there's a treatment that he puts on, which basically is a flexible type of paint, which has a very high copper and zinc content.
And when you're purchasing vehicles, sea level versus inland?
Look, any sea level. We're based in Cape Town. Rust isn't such an issue here. If you're in the warmer climates, Durban, further north, it's worse. It's harsh on the vehicles. You can spray your vehicle down underneath with, a mixture of oil and diesel. It's going to drip like crazy, but eventually some will stick. And if you get a proper rust treatment done by a company that actually does it, then they should get into the chassis and spray in the chassis. They should go inside the door cavities. It's time consuming to do it, and it's pricey, but it's worth it.
Longevity of your truck.
It's absolutely, and also to spray the cars down. The worst thing people do on expedition is they go across the salt pan and they don't wash the car. And you go, what was a great car is now just caked in rust. So salt pans are not great for your trucks, and if you're on a salt pan, come off and rinse that car off thoroughly.
Best way to rinse a car?
You always find in Africa there's guys who've got nice power washers, and you want to be on a ramp. You can't really rinse a car off properly unless you can get underneath it and clean it. And if you properly rinse it and get the power washer into all the cavities and that, you'll get a good section of it off.
Make use of the locals.
If I'm shipping a car, I actually take engine oil and diesel, and as I said, it's messy, and I'll go and I'll spray it completely, everywhere, in the engine, everywhere, because I know that when it's in the ship, on a container, on a ship, it's going to get a lot of sea moisture, and that's not great for your vehicle. Really what we're talking about here is taking a vehicle and building back in reliability, and that's the first phase. Bought the vehicle, we've registered, which we do, and I'm able to do that whole process, but the next phase is really about the mechanical side. And then after the mechanical side's done, sort the chassis out, the suspension gets put on, the new shock absorbers, the new springs, and then the chassis gets done. And now we then look at the process of building the interior. And that's the fun part. That's really about understanding, what do my clients want, where are they going to use the vehicle, how are they going to use it. And a good example is, I've often asked people, are you going to just travel? What's the big picture? Let's zoom out. Tell me the big picture. And if it's not on your radar, let's talk about it, because I don't want to build something and then come and think, well, we should have thought about that in the big picture. When we've got the big picture, it may look like we're thinking we might do Africa, and then how about South America? Well, if you're talking South America is it's very different from Africa. You've got high altitude to contend with. You've got a lot of very cold, exposed areas where you haven't got a lot of protection, trees and bushes. I've driven all around South America, and I really wouldn't say all around, but certainly I've done some amazing trips through South America. It's a beautiful continent, but you do have to be very mindful that it's much more exposed. So a turbo on the diesel engine is going to be really, really nice to have when you're at altitude of high up mountain passes, especially over 3,000 meters. And living in the vehicle and around the vehicle is also important. And that's where these trucks come into their own. Whereas if you're doing a vehicle where you can't really live inside and you're more living out, it's much more conducive to the Africa, Australia climates. So that picture for me is critical. And that's where the internet and things can't often share enough of that with people, because it's individualistic. I mean, I need to, and the person dealing with the client needs to actually go, what are the questions? I need to understand your needs, your wants, where you're going, how you see yourself using the vehicle, that big picture, and then design the setup and layout so it works and serves you now and going forward. Quite often clients, we will finish the truck, they'll do Africa, or we'll just ship it straight to South America or Australia for them. And that depends on where they're going.
Is there information overload for newbies that are coming to overlanding from the internet?
Massive. Anything. I mean, you take on something new, take your career, what I do, you bring someone into, it's a new language. Suddenly people who've never been around vehicles more than driving a car have now got to learn a whole new language. We're talking about diffs, and we're talking about diff locks, and we're talking about things that they wouldn't normally put their head under the bonnet. And it's so important to take on that knowledge and learn that, because that's where the responsibility comes back in. That's where we talk about our responsible overlanding, is that you're taking your family to a remote place, and being remote can and is very dangerous. You can go in the Aussie outback and you've got a lot more than just the environment. You've got all the animals and dangers, and in Africa as well. But that's actually not the dangerous part. The dangerous part is when we actually don't take responsibility, and that's so simple to do. By spending time, I won't build a truck for someone unless they're prepared to do training, because in my mind, I'm not serving them properly. It's half a job.
And you can't send somebody out with
training. If you've got the money, you can send parts out. But the reality is,
no, but I mean, having one of your signature products with no training.
Well, no, I just don't do that. For me, it's a value thing, and I ask that up front. I want to know what people's experience are. Some people have got fantastic experience, and sometimes it's not always in overland travel, but it complements overland travel. I had a guy, and he was a brilliant project manager, and he has really focused in the way he does his work. And when his car broke down on a trip in South America, by the time I got to him, he had organized the part, he had it on a courier. He didn't know what to do with it when it got there. And when I got there, he said, Paul, you know what, I'm good with people. I'm good at organizing stuff and delegating. That's my strength. So I've got that side sorted. That's where I can help. What I can't do is actually put it on the car. So you figure that bit for me and we sort it. And that for me was really great, because that's where people don't always appreciate that sometimes their strength, is actually more valuable to them than they realize. So it's understanding that, plus understanding the knowledge gaps. And this is not rocket science. It is to someone who's going to build your engine and do it properly. You need a good qualified guy. Don't go and take work on a car that you have no experience with, like doing wheel bearings and you've never done it. That's dangerous. That's irresponsible. But understand how to check a wheel bearing by jacking the car up, holding the wheel on the top and bottom and feeling for play. That's easy. So I work with my clients, giving them checklists so that they can go in when someone's doing their car that they don't know, some remote workshop or somewhere, they can go through a checklist. Okay, they can work through what we're saying. And a service is not about, I've done 5,000 Ks, just change the oil filter. When you're doing an overland trail trip, you've got to check a lot more than that, because your car has gone over some horrendous roads, things come loose, all equipment on the vehicle needs to be tightened. So there's a much bigger checklist. And often it's just checking, but it's peace of mind. You've checked all the stuff through, you're happy, you're confident that it's all okay. You've actually got to a point where when you go leave from a workshop, you've done your safety checks and you're happy to drive. Now, those safety checks are critical, because from experience, people forget to tighten a wheel nut. It's not intentional, but it can happen. Maybe the oil filter isn't tight. Maybe there isn't quite enough oil, and when they top the oil up, they didn't run the engine, then do another check on the oil. That's where your responsibility comes in. That's where the knowledge is actually quite easy to understand and go, do the oil check. Right, let's just tip the oil. Hang on, you haven't put the last bit of oil in. You didn't run the engine after I topped it up, so that filter's not full, and now the oil's on level. I'm happy. Some plug's tight, oil filter's tight. Less can go wrong. Wheels are tight. So now I'm actually really confident that nothing stupid is going to let me down. and that's important. And if you're going to hire a car, be responsible. Get under the bonnet, check the oil, check the water. When was the car serviced? What are the tire conditions like? What kit do I have? Do I have a jacket? Does it work? Are there warning triangles? Are there high-vis vests? Safety, 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 you know? And what is, if I break down, what is the situation? And what is the numbers that I need to carry? And what are the numbers of medical issues? And you can see where I'm going. So those are the questions I want to trigger people to ask. Whereas if you sit back and you rely on people to give it to you and they don't always give it to you, that's where it all falls down. Where are you taking the responsible overlanding for your own good, not for their good? People don't really care. If you haven't asked about the truck, you'll only know about the problem when it happens, and then you've got to deal with it. And you're the one who suffers. You're the one whose holiday is compromised. You're sitting in the middle of nowhere. Sure, good companies will give you the support and backup, for sure. But what's that cost you? What's the time, the hassle? You're not where you want to be.